Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Kate Woda, head of the Immuno-Oncology 360 Summit, which will take place March 24th through 26th in Boston, Massachusetts. IO360 is the premier meeting for advancing innovation in IO by bringing together experts across science, clinical development, and business to help combat a wide range of cancers. As part of our mission to foster collaboration and share groundbreaking insights, IO360 is pleased to partner with BioVerse to co-present today's webinar, China-to-West: Deals Shaping the IO Landscape. This webinar will cover how China's biotech innovation is reshaping global pharma. As a thank you for attending, we're happy to offer a 20% discount for the upcoming IO360 event using the code displayed on the screen. Now, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce today's moderators, Dr. Leon Tang, founder of InScienceWeTrust Bioadvisory, and Dr. Axel Hoos, former CEO of Scorpion Therapeutics. They'll kick us off and welcome our distinguished panelists. So welcome, Leon and Axel.
Thank you, Kate, and hello, everybody. We welcome you to this webinar that we thought would be very timely to lead us into the IO360 meeting starting on the 24th of March, just about a month away, in Boston, Massachusetts. As you all know, we have started IO360 11 years ago, had 10 great years in New York, and figured that we can reach even more of the biotech community if we move the meeting to Boston. So that's our first time in Boston starting later in March. So we look forward to this and are very excited about the opportunity to partner with BioVerse for this particular webinar that is touching on an extremely relevant topic, China to West, bringing China innovation to the US and the rest of the Western world. So I look forward to this. My name is Axel Hoos. I'm the co-founding advisor of IO360 for the last 11 years. I will give the word to my partner, Leon Tang, to just get us started with some background and some statistics on the topic we're talking about.
Thank you, Axel, and thank you, Kate, for having us to trust BioVerse to be your partner. We will be there as well. A little bit about us, BioVerse, for the IO360 audience who dialed in the first time. BioVerse is the webinar co-produced by 3 Asian biotech professional focused nonprofit. First one's the InScienceWeTrust Community, ISW Community. Second one's the SAPA-GP, Central America Pharmaceutical Professionals Association, Gui Fei chapter. The last one actually is the Boston local, BioSpark. Shout out to BioSpark. They have been in Boston for a long time. So that's us, BioVerse. So what we do on the BioVerse, we are monthly webinar, really want to bring the global leaders in the biotech, biopharma space to share their insight, latest trend, and some exciting stuff on the horizon. So we have been doing this since June 2023. So we have a YouTube channel. We have a pretty big following, up to over 20,000 live attendee per episode. We have quite a few partners, especially based in China. With that being said, we want to kick off why we are here today, why China to West deal flow is so exciting. So I would share some analysis from my own small company, ISW Bioadvisory, from recent publication. So let me share the screen with you. And Axel, please help me say whether you can see the screen.
So far, I can't. But, the one thing we should do before we get into your data, maybe just quickly introduce our panelists. So we have 4 esteemed panelists that have substantial experience with the deals, or at least some of the deals that have been done in the recent past. And so I would just ask Frank, Cindy, Grace, and Nikolaus to just appear on screen and do a quick introduction about yourself and your background so we can, go straight into the data. Maybe we start with Frank?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Frank Fekete, I'm a managing director at Centerviews Partners. I've been at the firm for 4 years. I've had the good fortune over the last 4 years to work on many of the China deals that we'll be discussing today. I am exclusively focused in the biotech sector here at Centerview. We focus exclusively on M&A. Prior to joining Centerview, I was at Goldman Sachs in their healthcare group as well. And before getting into the industry, I was at Georgetown Medical School doing a master's in physiology and biophysics. I've been in the industry for a little more than 10 years now, and it's a pleasure joining everybody today.
Great, thank you. Cindy.
Hi, thanks the organizers for inviting me today, and great to be here. My name is Cindy Xiong. I'm a partner at Foresite Capital. I have a combined business and science background, and we have been very active in China and have been involved in a lot of deals that we're going to share today. And Foresight is a healthcare dedicated investment firm. We have about $3.5 billion under management. We have recently closed our recent fund 6, which is a $900 million fund. And we're full life cycle investment strategy, all the way from company incubation to late stage venture and crossover IPO, and also public market investing. And very much look forward to the discussion today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cindy. Grace.
Hi, everyone. Grace Han McMahon. I lead Merck's Pacific BD&L team. I'm based in South San Francisco. At Merck, BD is a critical part of our pipeline. We have teams based in major life science ecosystem hubs. I have colleagues in Boston, London, and then our headquarters team in New Jersey. Our remit is to find transformative science that we can translate into medicines and make a difference for patients, address unmet medical need. We are modality agnostic. We work across multiple therapeutic areas, including oncology, immunology, infectious diseases, vaccines, neuroscience, cardiometabolic diseases, and ophthalmology. I've been with Merck a combined 16 years. I moved out to the West Coast to work for Genentech in 2013, and very much look forward to being a part of this panel.
Fantastic. Thank you. Nick.
Hi, so thanks Axel, Leon, and IO360 for asking me to participate. My name is Nick George. I am a partner in the IP life sciences practice of the law firm of Jones Day. I have worked on all aspects of patent law for over 30 years now. My original tech background was in molecular biology and genetics, so my focus has been on developing portfolios on all types of biologics and assessing portfolios in the context of potential public-private transactions, as well as potential partnerships. I'm based in our New York office, but I'm part of a worldwide group. Jones Day has over 2,400 attorneys in 40 offices across 5 continents. For this particular topic, in particular, we have offices in Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Beijing. We have a whole team of global IP specialists that are fluent in both Chinese and English, and we have, needless to say, extensive cross-border US-China transactional experience. So looking forward to the discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So as you can see, we have assembled a panel with broad expertise across the entire spectrum of what we want to cover in this discussion. I'm very pleased that you all were able to join us today. And now we go to some background data and statistics, and back to Leon.
All right, so Axel, can you see the screen now, everyone?
The screen is visible, yes.
All right, so I can make it pretty concise, probably take 5 minutes, give people a little bit idea why we are here today, in case you are not following this space as I am, and all the panelists today. So this is analysis done by my firm. By the way, I'm also a founder. This BD cross-border consulting firm called InScienceWeTrust Advisory. That's my another hat. As you know, if you are in this field, last week there's 2 quite interesting articles. First one is from Financial Times from UK, and the title is China really is a place to get a super me too. That's how they call this, super me too drug. On the other hand, the Wall Street Journal, one day after, published this article, pretty provocative title. It said like, our industry is having our own DeepSeek moment. If you don't know DeepSeek, just look at what the so-called stock, tech stock performance a few weeks ago. You probably know what I'm talking about. So they are really claiming like the China biotech is really giving the global drug industry DeepSeek moment, which I have a different opinion. But regardless, let's just look at the quick data. Why this top financial articles talk about China biotech in such a way? First of all, if you are in JP Morgan, you probably saw this chart or heard about Tim Opler talk about this, a different version. The headline is, of all the molecules in licensed by Big Pharma last year, about 31% came from China. So the data analysis is really based on this, actually a little bit more. Because Tim Opler and the Stifel report only look at the Big Pharma, we want to show you the full picture. So I would say the licensor, that's the BD jargon we use in our space, pretty much the buyer, not just Big Pharma, also biotech and the VC fund, like Wendy's Foresite Capital. With that being said, we only focus on the big one. We kind of plot all the data, select the top 48 major China-to-West deals in 2024. And we also, all the highlighted one actually were participated by the companies from the panel, on the panel today. In the meantime, I also want to make a disclosure on behalf of all the panel. Today's opinion, just a personal opinion of the panelists, does not represent the position and opinion from the companies and does not serve as investment advice. Please keep that in mind. Go back to this, the highlighted one really involved by the company from the panelists today. With that being said, let's just dive right into this 48 deals, which are accumulated together, generated $8.4 billion cash or pre-money equity last year. So if you first look at this is actually a surprise. This is why, probably why the Financial Times published this. Actually, first of all, if you look at the deal count, European slightly outperformed the US with the 23 versus 22, and also they spend a little bit more money than the US companies in terms of upfront payment. So that's the first observation. The second one, quite interesting, we heard about China used to be me too, fast follow. But one thing quite interesting is if you look at the deal flow from last year, first of all, about, I would say, 3/4 of the deal went to the assay, which are in preclinical, pretty much preclinical or phase 1 stage. And then if you go to the upfront payment, very similar. So that's actually really suggests the Chinese innovation are getting recognized by the Western companies. They don't need to wait until they have de-risked phase 2 data. Sometimes even like a preclinical, let's say just like 6 months away from the first in-human trial, they would be acquired or getting licensed by the Western company. So that's quite interesting, very different from before. Another one is about, people always think a big pharma, like the Stifel report pointed out, typically is a big tech writer. But for China originated innovations, of course, still big pharma contribute to, about 40% of the deals and contribute to more than half of the upfront payment. But biotech is not far behind. In terms of deal numbers, actually they outnumber big pharma, and their upfront payment is comparable. Big pharma is 52% of the upfront payment, and biotech is actually 43%. Don't forget the largest M&A with the China biotech last year actually was done with the GenMed, which is a mid-sized biotech instead of a big pharma. Another thing is about, obviously the M&A started by actually AstraZeneca acquired Gracell in 2023. Since then, last year we saw 5 M&A with a China-based biotech company or some asset acquisition. So now if you look at the 2 major formats, the BD and the traditional one, still dominant in terms of the deal count. But if you look at the contribution by different type of a deal type, M&A is pretty significant. Only 5 M&A/asset acquisition, they contribute as much upfront payment as those, almost like a 33 BD&L traditional deals. One more thing is about, China used to people think, just do small molecule or monoclonal antibody, which is still largely true, but they are diversified away from this 2 dominant modality. And especially within the biological space, they have a monoclonal antibody, they have a bispecific, trispecific, T-cell engager, quite diversified. So that's something we saw clearly. They are not just like, have the best medicinal chemist and simple kind of protein engineer optimize the traditional modality. Actually, there's a lot of new engineering innovation over there, allow them to generate quite a bit of innovation in, for example, ADC, T-cell engager, and multi-specific monoclonal antibody or biologics. And they actually, the number of they are from number of deals as well as are from payment from those different modalities quite significant, quite diversified compared to before. So this is another thing, China used to be almost a predominantly focus on oncology, which is still largely true, to be fair, 2024. But I think compared to, let's say 5 years ago, they have a significant representation in terms of a China-to-West deal flow in I&I, especially autoimmune diseases, as well as obesity, which is actually probably the hardest, the largest contribution in our current global drug development. So I think still China pure heavily towards the oncology, but they get into at least I&I and obesity and cardiometabolic diseases space as well. However, we haven't seen much CNS, which is one of the 4 hardest fields in the the global, especially Western US drug development space. So we'll see whether 2025 going to have something different. The last one is really want to tie to the topic of IO360, right? IO right now have a little bit, I would say, correction. If you look at deal flow, it's quite interesting from China as well. IO, just look at the number, it's not a major domain in terms of a deal flow and upfront payment, but still significant. Don't get me wrong. We already know oncology is very important, the most predominant base IO still a significant portion of it. But the one thing you can take from this is China follow the global trend pretty close, particularly in the oncology space, right? If you look at the oncology deal flow, including Axel Hoos, your former company Scorpion, not necessarily in the immuno-oncology, right? So that's kind of another small data point to show you IO still there, but other part of a non-IO part of oncology actually probably right now is contribute to the majority of the deal flow and the activity in oncology space. With that being said, that's all we have. If you're interested in learning about my small team, feel free to follow us. And with that being said, I'm back to you, Axel.
All right. Well, thank you, Leon. Great introduction and some background for this conversation. Now, a key point I will make, you all know my sentiment that I had broadcast already before IO360, is that, innovation goes in waves and you will have peaks and you have valleys. IO had a massive peak with the wave of checkpoint inhibitors when they came out from 2011 until, I would say, 2016, 17. And it's plateaued since then. And there's some people that say, oh, there's no more innovation in IO. I will just dare to say, there will be another peak. And some of what comes from our Chinese colleagues in terms of innovation in IO will contribute to that next peak. And just, the combination of bispecific antibodies of a PD-1 blocking component and a VEGFA, component is an indicator. This is going in the direction of the next wave of IO. So now, having said all that, I'd like to get started just with a bit of discussion about specific deals and give our panelists who have had hands-on experience with some specific deals the chance to weigh in. So I'm asking them to come back on screen. And I will just begin with, one deal that was of particular interest to me was the deal of that Merck did with LaNova, or others that Merck did with Curon, VelaVigo and Avenzo. I'm just cherry picking a few from the list that Leon has already shown. And, I ask our panelists to just provide a few thoughts, a bit of more depth on those deals before we go to specific questions. So who would like to get this underway? Frank, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So you mentioned a couple. I guess we can focus on Merck Curon, which was a very unique transaction in that you're able to see data in one TA be translatable to another. And what do I mean by that? The bispecifics, I'll take a step back. The bispecific space has been very hot topic. It's a new field, yet half of innovation in bispecifics is coming from China, which it's fantastic to see at such high pace and such high quality. And the idea of being able to have a CD3, CD19 be effective and efficacious in immunology, it has major read-through. Deep B-cell depletion, the ability to drive immune response, and the ease of manufacturing versus maybe, for example, the CAR Ts that are being explored in autoimmunity. And so the way that transaction came together was Curon had data in the oncology setting, clinical data, that validated the mechanism and the safety and the overall profile of the asset. And the Merck team was able to look at that data, get confidence in the asset, and say, we see this as an autoimmune play. We see really deep and durable responses. We see really good positioning versus other CD3, CD19s in the space. And we're going to leverage that data to get comfort in what we believe to be a larger opportunity in autoimmune. And so that we found to be really unique. And then also the way that, and I know we have Grace on the line as well, but the way that Merck was very constructive in the structure of that transaction, having it be a defined box with the IP and the asset so that it could be an asset purchase that was tax efficient for the broader company was a key characteristic there, and something that I think we'll see read through into other transactions.
All right, Grace, do you want to add anything to this?
Sure. I think Frank gave a really nice summary. At Merck, we scour the globe for the best science and assets. Curon was one of many opportunities that we looked at. As Frank explained, they have a next-gen CD3, CD19. There's other targets that you could go after, CD20, BCMA. And at Merck, it's always about the science and following the science. And through that extensive landscape and our review of the diligence and the data that Curon had generated, right, with respect to, in this case, B-cell malignancies, and then, of course, the potential application for autoimmune diseases, really exciting opportunity. And it's really important that deal structures make sense for both sides. And that was one where we explored and pursued what was optimal, not only for Merck, but also for our partner. And what I would say in terms of opportunities in science in China, Merck did a number of deals in 2024. Curon was an important one. We also did a global license with LaNova, also very important, an anti-PD-1 VEGF. There was pretty critical data that was released by Summit in May. And again, whenever there's an important breakthrough or announcement at Merck, we follow the science. And we scour the globe for opportunities. And it turned out that we felt the most differentiated opportunity was with LaNova. Another deal that was super important to Merck is in the cardiometabolic space. At Merck, we feel that going after oral approaches to important obesity targets is the way to play, in particular fixed dose combinations. And so again, looking for the best science, we ended up completing a deal with Hansoh. We expect to get their oral small molecule GLP-1 receptor agonist into the clinic later this year. And again, it's a result of looking for the best science, and with these opportunities, it turned out to be in China. And what we do see in China, and what's super exciting, is that for in particular, clinically validated targets. Chinese companies are very adept at engineering, designing, and making even better, more efficacious, safer molecules, and they're able to get them into the clinic pretty rapidly in China. And depending on the disease area, that's a great place to start with clinical data from Chinese patients. But again, it really depends on each particular situation and how, in the case of Merck, an opportunity where we can bring our expertise to really accelerate an important asset through our pipeline.
That's great. So, if I may just make the obvious observation that not all deals are big pharma with biotech. Some deals are biotech to biotech, and that brings an interesting dynamic into this picture. The one that I picked out that I found interesting was VelaVigo and Avenzo, and maybe you can say a few words about that. Leon, do you want to start this?
Yeah, sure. First, full disclosure, I'm advising VelaVigo, but I'm not involved directly into this deal, but I do know quite a bit of information. To give people a little bit idea, so the deal was announced, I believe it's in the past 2 or 3 months, and it is a bispecific ADC, preclinical stage, was our licensed ex-China rights to Avenzo by VelaVigo. And the upfront payment is pretty significant compared, considering it's a preclinical asset, 50 million upfront payment and the near-term milestone. And I think it's approaching 1 billion milestone, long-term milestone down the road. So why this one get picked by Axel? The interesting thing is, first of all, VelaVigo is a new company, only 3 years old. However, their 2 founders are quite representative of this new breed of, I call them American-Chinese company. Both founders are Chinese-American, and they have been doing this for decades. So obviously the ADC space have been through a lot of transition or like evolution in the past couple of years, from monospecific but site-specific conjugation ADC such as Enhertu by AstraZeneca Daiichi, to bispecific, right? That's pretty much where this asset really played in. And then regarding this company, I want to mention why I want to say this, the Chinese-American founder are very important. So the CEO, Jin Li, I mean, he actually spoke with our China panel last year. He used to be the head of a WuXi Biologics, a WuXi Body platform. Actually, a lot of molecules our license to the Western company were designed by him, including the one from Curon. So the Curon molecule was designed by his team when he was on WuXi Biologics, and then was our licensed to Curon. Curon developed it, and now in the hands of Grace's company. So that's pretty much, he was the designer of the molecule. And there's also quite a few T-cell engager get by GSK, was designed by his team. And then obviously he wanted to start his own company. He started a company about 3 years ago. So that's pretty much the scientific brain behind VelaVigo, heavily de-risked from track record. Then the other co-founder, Tong Zhang, what he did, he was a sell-side analyst, by the way, like many of us. And then he was the investor of CBC. And then he created a company, Everest Medicine. You probably heard about that one. They repurposed from in global for China. Right now, it's a pure top-performing biotech company with a strong operation in China. And then obviously he's very experienced with the capital market and BD space. That's why he could lead such a pretty impressive deal. So I think this kind of a new type of Chinese American founded biotech, and they understand what the global market really want. They can start a project which have a global competitive mindset. When they start this, going to be quite interesting, something worth our time to pay close attention. I'll stop right there. I think that's kind of a really good representative case.
Yeah, fantastic, Leon. Thank you for the color. And biotech and science is full of interesting backstories that they're worth telling, and they're really driving some of the innovation, but also some of the deal flow. So as I'm looking at the clock, we're half an hour in, and I want to make sure that at the tail end, our audience gets a chance to ask a few questions. So I will just switch from individual, deals to some more general questions about the space and how we see things unfold, that is worth going into. So I will pose a few questions to our panelists together with Leon, and at the end we'll open the door for a few audience questions. So I'll begin this with the first question, which is about the difference between global rights and ex-China rights that are part of some of these deal arrangements. So how commonly do you observe more global right deals or ex-China right deals, and what are the pros and cons of those two arrangements? So I'll pose this to the panelists. Who would like to get us kicked off?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to kick it off. So taking actually a more higher level view, when you think about an asset purchase versus a licensing transaction, it's really what we're solving for, right? So if the investors in the company are looking to have liquidation and to get returns, then any licensing transaction, regardless of the geographic split, is going to be a tax inefficient way of doing that, because you're going to be taxed on the corporate level and then also on the shareholder level. When it comes to the bifurcation of geographies, whether it's global or ex-China, I think it matters in two ways. The first is actually, let me say three ways. The first is what is the TA? Does the multinational pharma view China market as being a large piece of the overall value of the asset? Or is it something that's more so an ex-China play? The second is, does the originator of the asset or the China-based biotech have the capabilities and the financing required to move forward in China on their own? And then three, does the multinational company that is looking at potentially acquiring those rights have the infrastructure in place in China to successfully launch? You mentioned Gracell in the beginning. A big part of that was AstraZeneca wanting to establish a China presence, because once you have that infrastructure in place, you can leverage it for future transactions. But before that, there's regulatory authorities, dynamics that are different, pricing dynamics, et cetera. And it can be difficult if you don't know those markets well to be efficient and effective in launching a therapy in that specific area or geography. So, every transaction is different. There's different puts and takes, but I mean, that's kind of from a deal-making side, how we think about it.
That makes good sense. So, just to frame this further, market size outside of China, if you just look at US and Europe as the two largest oncology markets, are more than 70% of the global market. So if you have an asset that works in China that has already data in Chinese patients, you don't necessarily want to leave that value on the table and make these medicines not available to patients in these large geographies. So, finding a balance there, of course, together with the considerations that Frank has just raised, I think makes a lot of sense. And there's a lot of opportunity here that one should not miss. So are there other thoughts from our other panelists on this question?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Cindy.
Oh, go ahead, Grace. I'll go after you.
Sure. Just to layer on a few additional considerations. And Axel, I'm glad you brought up the point, for example, in the oncology context, if a Chinese company has already generated clinical data in Chinese patients, that can be very actionable. And in fact, for Merck, our first deal that we did with Curon Biotech, we structured it as an option. And as they generated that clinical data, it gave Merck the confidence to exercise that. And now MK-2870 has more than a dozen phase 3 studies. So it really depends on the situation and circumstances. I'd say, however, more broadly, a global license is what we feel is best for the molecule. We're able to bring forward our extensive global clinical development expertise. Studies are global now, and you want to be able to have studies all over the world, including China. Also, from an IP perspective, being able to have a unified IP portfolio from a CMC, COGS, manufacturing perspective, there's a lot of efficiencies if there is one registration holder and responsible party. Some of the challenges when you have split geographies is if your partner ends up making changes to the molecule, generating different kinds of data, the presentation of the drug itself, if the dosage strengths, all of these things can just add complexity. That said, it really depends on what the objectives are for the partner. Some companies, their investors want them to advance it as far as they can and then hand it over to a company like Merck or another multinational. There are companies in China, however, who do aspire to become established pharmaceutical companies where their drugs and medicines are household names. So it's really a blend, but there are some really good, compelling reasons why it may make sense to let a large company develop and take a candidate forward globally.
All right. Cindy.
Yeah, maybe I can speak from the investor perspective. I want to take one step back. So at Foresite, we actually be pretty flexible with the deal structure. In the past year, we have done direct investment. We have created new co. We have also had portfolio companies that has licensed China-based asset, including the one that Axel and Leon has mentioned. Avenzo is actually our portfolio company, for example. And also we have brought a Chinese company into IPO through a reverse merger pipe deal. So all kind of deal structure. And I think, as well said by Grace, really is a context-dependent question here. Maybe I can speak about, the new co situation. I do think in some sense, I think ex-China right might allow a win-win situation here. Because I think especially for new co deals where, the upfront payment might not be huge, compared to some of the traditional licensing deals, the licensor or biotech company will still probably have fundraising needs. And keeping the China rights probably help them to still be able to list based on the value of that program in the Asia Pacific capital markets. And also on the licensing perspective, I think like Grace mentioned, I think the clinical data continue to generate in China could actually help to inform the design in the ex-China clinical studies and may even build a case for accelerated clinical paths. However, I think it's important to keep in mind for licensee to actually have visibility to the clinical design and data from the China study, and also probably sometimes it be helpful to form a joint steering committee where you can actually have a weigh in for the clinical design. I think overall, I think, I see, situations with either global rights or ex-China rights. I think it really depends on how the deal structure and then the needs of the two parties.
This makes a lot of sense. And, there's a lot of upside that a spin-out company with ex-China rights can generate for both sides. So I see a lot of value in that arrangement. And there's one other aspect one might consider, which is the speed of early clinical trial conduct in China is a bit faster than the US. So you can get a lot of early data generated that will then inform the global program. So that has a lot of value as well. So makes a lot of sense. So now with that said, I'll just move to the next question because time is not our friend. This one is about intellectual property, particularly when it's, about expectations that a US-based company that wants to in-license China rights or even global rights for an asset, what expectations should we anticipate from a US partner for this kind of a transaction? So Nick, maybe that's a question for you.
That sounds like a question for me, Axel. So I think as Grace nicely mentioned, potential partners, I think, still generally let the science lead a deal. But right below the surface of that, assuming the science looks good, a solid IP position really is important. And I think partners, whether they're US or not, will look at IP from 2 points of view. An inward point of view, asking, does the company have solid protection for the asset that's of most interest to the deal? And then an outward view, asking, are there any freedom to operate issues that might come in to be relevant to bringing the asset to market in the relevant jurisdiction? With respect to inward view and protection of the IP, while certainly scope of one's patent filing is important, getting the breadth that you might be able to get, I think partners generally, at least in my experience, are relatively rational about these things and really want to look at solid protection, around the sort of orbit of the asset of interest. And to me and the clients that we work with, what solid means in reality is, are there claims, patent claims, and patent disclosure that will likely lead to a portfolio that is likely to stand up if challenged by courts in the future. That can be sometimes hard to predict, but we do the best we can with a moving target. And then second, given the portfolio, is it likely that the portfolio is going to have sufficient patent term when it's really needed? So post-approval and ideally post-regulatory exclusivities. And sometimes, especially with early stage programs, that's hard to come up with a first generation filing. But what we like to look for in those sorts of instances is sort of a temporal view to how to develop a portfolio. So is the first generation filing solid for what you have now, but does the portfolio leave enough room open for follow-on coverage that might be very important in the future? So basically not unduly creating too much prior art for yourself moving forward. And then on the freedom to operate side, I think even smaller potential partners are sophisticated enough at this point to know that with modern technologies, it is relatively rare in these days to have a completely clean slate for freedom to operate. So that is certainly taken into account in deals. In my experience, it's been relatively rare for a deal to be killed for freedom to operate issues, but it's not unheard of. So especially if you have a small, an early stage portfolio that could, at least at the level of development, have other potentially equal alternatives that are available, freedom to operate could very well be an unstoppable hurdle if certain claims come up. More likely, and I think this is fairly common, is a freedom to operate landscape where there are potential issues, and those issues, while not deal stoppers, can affect the overall value of the deal. I think the way to approach that, or we try to approach that, is sort of a no surprise goal. So going into a diligence, sort of knowing what the freedom to operate landscape looks like, and having to the extent possible, a solid position on how to put your asset into the context of freedom to operate that will allow a potential partner to factor in the potential risk and hopefully be able to move forward, ideally with a value that is of mutual benefit to both parties. So I think that's sort of a high level of how I think not only U.S. partners, but all partners probably look at these sorts of opportunities.
That's quite helpful. Thank you, Nick. Much appreciated. I will just reverse this question now, at least to some degree. Expectations exist on both sides. So it's not only American companies or Western companies having expectations towards a China partner, but also the China partner having expectations towards the West. Are there any specific pointers that you can give our audience about, what might be the expectations now on the side of the Chinese collaborator? Any thoughts on who would like to kick this? Well, I will just say, the one thing that I have observed is that it is common that Chinese companies now have expectations towards the quality of the partner in the West in terms of ability to execute and make sure that the value of the product that is being transferred is optimized. So speed and quality of execution, I think, matters big time for choosing a potential partner, especially if there's multiple suitors. So it's no longer just about getting a deal. It's also about making sure you have an optimal partner to produce value on the other side. The fact that the market is large is not enough. There needs to be, some depth in expertise and ability to execute to make a deal worthwhile. At least that's the observation I've made, but you guys might have other insights.
Yeah, I mean, these transactions are typically pretty back-end heavy in terms of the considerations, both on a clinical milestones, but then also it could be on sales milestones.
Yeah.
And when evaluating any transaction, especially if you're fortunate enough to have multiple parties submitting proposals, doing the risk adjustment and the NPV analysis of those milestones is absolutely critical. Because what you'll see is, do I believe what is the difference or the potential of this asset in one party's hands versus the other? What is the likelihood that we'll reach this sales threshold that triggers, X milestone payment versus if it's in the hands of somebody else? Pharma is pursuing these assets not only because they are very high quality, but also because they're able to catch up maybe to an innovation curve that they previously didn't have that exposure to. And so I think the risk of, a pharma bringing in-house an asset and then shelving it is very low. That's not the prerogative here, especially after paying 500 million plus up front. That just doesn't necessarily, happen. You can always put commercially reasonable efforts in a contract, but that's very difficult to prosecute against on a litigation standpoint. But at the end of the day, Axel, what you're referencing in terms of the milestone payments and how you consider them and how you value them and how you compare them to others is absolutely a critical part of the calculus.
Yes, we would agree with that. So now I'm looking at the clock. As I said, time is never your friend for these kind of interactions. We have a lot of content. So I'll give the word to Leon to guide us through a few extra questions.
Thank you, Axel. So I would recommend that the panelists do like a rapid fire style, so we can go to as many questions as possible. Let's do a competition. Who can answer a question in 20 seconds or 30 seconds? So my first one is, what's the Western pharma's key deal selection criteria? I mean, specific for pharma, probably also biotech, large one, when they evaluate the Chinese asset. Or Grace, I want to give a try first.
Sure, I'd say it's the quality of the data being transparent. At times we see companies who will cherry pick data. Our scientists and diligence teams are very rigorous. We know that not everything can be answered. So I think that is critical. And then just to follow up on the earlier discussion around speed and execution, knowing who it is you're going to be collaborating with, right? Who on the clinical team, who in discovery, especially for research collaborations, and Merck does have quite a few. And we found that the most successful ones are partners where they absorb and hear what our colleagues are telling them. And on the other side, bringing forward their strengths. And then together you can really rapidly accelerate candidates into the clinic.
Fantastic. Probably I'm gonna cue Cindy. I know you're involved with some of the deals. No specific one need to mention, but I'm pretty sure What's your observation when you work with the pharma?
Yeah, so we actually have a very broad mandate for therapeutic. We're pretty much therapeutic area agnostic, and then I think we're really looking for innovation and differentiation. And I think everyone is looking for the best in class. But I think having in mind what the competitive landscape look like will be important. And it's not uncommon that for certain targets, you probably find a dozen companies more or less similar stage. I think for those areas, really careful look at the data package, and then also I think in the communication with the company is a key here. If the assets are more or less similar, I think to Grace's point, how the research team be able to execute and also present the data in a transparent way is very important for us to, as the potential collaborators. And also I'd say that, we have seen some language barrier here. And of course, as a native Chinese speaker, I'm helping to bridge some of the gaps. But I think, hopefully with the newer technology for translation, that barrier can be erased.
Any other comments, Frank or Nick? You would advise the people who want to have a deal with the big pharma and big biotech from the West?
Well, I think from an IP standpoint, especially for science coming out of China, as I said, having a solid IP base is important, and the kinds of technology that we see coming out of China are generally in very crowded areas, and sometimes, are tough to put a portfolio together around, given the prior art and the similarity to what came before. So starting early, so you not only have good initial data, but a nice portfolio to back that up, I think is pretty essential.
All right, so let's just squeeze one last question. I think it's very relevant. Again, please do rapid fire. Make sure you answer in 30 seconds. So we saw a lot of, especially just a deal I mentioned today, a lot of like a traditional IO company pivot to I&I, particularly autoimmune diseases, right? Like the Curon deal, GSK Hamilton deal, and a lot of them. And even a lot of CAR T company initially developed a CAR T for hematology. Right now, they pivot to autoimmune diseases. So can you comment your observation, of course, with the spin of a China-to-West deal flow, how the IO company are reinventing themselves and getting to one of the hardest, not the hardest I&I space? Cindy, you want to start? I know you are pretty familiar with this space.
Yeah, so I think, actually oncology and autoimmune are probably two sides of one coin. And basically, you'll probably work against a very overactive immune system for autoimmune versus for IO. You're leveraging the immune system to kind of cure cancer or kind of kill cancer cells. So, I think it's not, I'd say it's not illogical to pivot from IO to autoimmune, given that a lot of the targets are probably shared, and you can see that, for example, PD-1 agonists being used for autoimmune versus antagonists being used for IO. So I think scientifically that makes a lot of sense. And then also there's immune cell depletion. I think that talks to Liang, what you mentioned about T-cell engager that deplete B cells or plasma cell for autoimmune indications because of the involvement of the immune cell in those cancer cell types. And then therefore, using the construct that can deplete the immune cells to treat autoimmune indications. And I think that the whole wave of using T-cell engager for autoimmune indications were first, I think, or validated by data from CAR T. And then just certain people realize, there has been a lot of logistic hurdle to actually use, for especially autologous CAR T. And then therefore T-cell engager has been a really attractive modality, given the both like deep B cell or plasma cell depletion, but also the easy to make and the lower cost and the convenience that T-cell engagers provided. So sorry, Leon, that's over 30 seconds, but that's my thoughts.
And I think few TAs beyond immunology offer the value arbitrage for pharma. Yeah, once the pathway has been established and the on-target engagement has been validated, large pharma can take that asset in-house and then explore it across a plethora of indications and have significant value creation and top-line impact for their revenue CAGR. More so than any other indication. It's something that a standalone independent biotech can't do because of just the sheer resources required to look at something and study something across so many indications in parallel studies that enable you to capture the full IP life cycle upon launch. And so I think that pharma is able to say, okay, I'm happy to pay a premium here because I know I can recoup that investment, assuming it all works, on the back end in a very meaningful way.
Great point.
So Leon, should we take one audience question before we run out of time?
Yes, please. So Axel, you pick one.
I'll pick one, and come first, serve first kind of approach. So there's a question here about Me Too versus super Me Too assets. So how many of the deals we have observed were actually done on Me Too or super Me Too kind of assets? So I will just give an opinion on this because I don't have real stats that allows me to answer this, but I will say there's a lot more innovation coming out of China than it was the case at the very beginning of the biotech scene in China. The world has changed a lot. There's a lot more innovation that I think is actionable. That means it may not be a completely new platform, a completely new space where nobody has ever played, but things that are moving the needle that can help more patients and go from a 1.0 to a 2.0 kind of iteration of any given space. And certainly in IO, we need IO 2.0. So I see bispecific antibodies that can improve patient outcomes as innovation. That's not a Me Too, right? Even if the targets are known. So I view that as the vast majority of deals not being Me Too deals. But, Leon and anyone else, you might want to weigh in on this.
I think this is really well said. I mean, also, I pose a question to the audience. Do you think HER2 is a Me Too? Right? It's a HER2 ADC, and the TDM have been there for a long time, right? But we all agree HER2 is a innovative asset, regardless of whether the target is old or not. So I'll stop right there. I see like Kate is open the camera. I think she wants to wrap up. And back to you, Kate.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks for everyone for joining today's webinar. And we really hope that you found the discussion insightful and valuable. As a quick reminder, the IO360 Summit will be taking place March 24th through 26th in Boston. And as a participant in today's webinar, you're eligible for that discount, which is there on your screen for you. And for more information, you can visit io360summit.com. Again, thanks, Leon, Axel, and our panelists for today. And we look forward to seeing everyone in Boston in March.
Thanks, everyone. This was a great conversation. I look forward to see you all in March.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. See you in Boston.